Millionaire heiress inherits company and pretends to be secretary to test employees. She's horrified by what she overhears. Emma Thompson gazed out at the city from the window of her luxurious penthouse. At 28 years old, she was the heiress to the Thompson Empire, one of the most powerful business conglomerates in the country. However, the satisfaction she should have felt from her privileged position was overshadowed by a growing sense of unease. 6 months ago, her father, the legendary businessman Richard Thompson, had suddenly passed away, leaving her in charge of a vast corporate empire. Emma had grown up watching her father run the business with a mixture of shrewdness and compassion, maintaining a delicate balance between financial success and employee well-being. Now, it was up to her to maintain that legacy. However, something didn't add up. Since taking nominal control of the company, Emma had noticed subtle but worrying changes. The financial reports, though apparently solid, seemed to have minor discrepancies she couldn't explain. Meetings with the directors, men and women who had worked side by side with her father for decades, felt increasingly tense and evasive. But what troubled her most was the growing disconnect she perceived between senior management and lower-level employees. Rumors of discontent and veiled complaints reached her ears with alarming frequency. That morning, Emma made a bold decision. If she really wanted to understand what was happening in her company, she needed to see it from the inside, without the filter of her privileged position. With a mixture of determination and apprehension, she formulated a risky plan. She would infiltrate her own company under a false identity. Emma spent the next few weeks meticulously preparing her transformation. She dyed her hair a discreet brown, swapped her designer wardrobe for more modest outfits, and practiced a slightly different accent. She created a fictitious identity, Sarah Johnson, a young woman with no experience looking for her first job as a secretary. The day Sarah showed up at Thompson Corp headquarters for her interview, Emma felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She observed the imposing building that housed her family's empire, this time from the perspective of just another hopeful among hundreds. The interview was with Barbara Collins, the Human Resources Director. Emma had known her since childhood, but now, disguised as Sarah, she found herself facing a cold and calculating woman, very different from the Aunt Barb she remembered. "Miss Johnson," Barbara said, examining her fictional resume with disdain, "your experience is, well, practically non-existent. Why should we hire you?" Emma, in her role as Sarah, responded with a mixture of genuine nervousness and feigned enthusiasm. "I know I don't have experience, Mrs. Collins, but I'm willing to work hard and learn quickly. I'll give my best in every task assigned to me." Barbara looked at her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, Sarah, we don't usually hire people without experience for positions in the main office. However, the marketing department urgently needs a temporary assistant. It will be a demanding job and don't expect any special treatment. Do you think you can handle it?" "Of course, Mrs. Collins, I'm ready for any challenge," Emma replied, aware of the irony of asking for a job in her own company. "Very well," said Barbara, closing the folder. "You start tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." As she left the office, Emma felt a mixture of triumph and apprehension. She had managed to get in, but this was just the beginning. What she would discover in the coming weeks would forever change her perception of the company she thought she knew so well. That night, in the solitude of her penthouse, Emma looked at her reflection as the powerful Thompson heiress for the last time. Starting tomorrow, she would immerse herself completely in her role as Sarah Johnson. As she prepared for bed, she couldn't help but wonder, what secrets would she uncover? And at what price would that knowledge come? The Thompson Corp building loomed imposingly against the morning sky when Emma, now fully transformed into Sarah Johnson, crossed its main doors. The nervousness she felt was real. Despite knowing every corner of this place, today she saw everything with new eyes. She headed to the security desk, where a guard looked at her indifferently. "Sarah Johnson, it's my first day," she said, surprised at how strange her own voice sounded with the practiced accent. After receiving her temporary credential, Emma headed to the elevators. While waiting, she couldn't help but notice the sidelong glances thrown at her by passing executives, some of whom she had known since childhood. None recognized her, but all seemed to be evaluating her, as if trying to determine if she was important enough to merit their attention. The discomfort she felt was genuine. The marketing department was buzzing with activity when she arrived. A middle-aged woman with a perpetually tired expression greeted her. "You must be the new one. I'm Martha, the department's executive assistant. Follow me, I'll show you to your desk." Emma followed Martha through a maze of cubicles until they reached a small desk in a corner, far from the windows and anything that could be considered a pleasant view. "This will be your space," said Martha, pointing to the worn chair and the computer that looked several years old. "Your main job will be to assist the marketing executives in whatever they need. That includes making photocopies, preparing coffee, organizing schedules, and anything else they ask of you. Understood?" Emma nodded, trying to appear grateful for the opportunity. "Yes, of course, I'll do my best." "Good," Martha replied without much enthusiasm. "Oh, and one more thing. Mr. Rivers, the marketing director, is very demanding with his coffee. He takes it black, no sugar, at exactly 65 degrees. There's a thermometer in the kitchen. If you mess it up, you'll know." With those encouraging words, Martha left her alone. Emma sat down, feeling strangely small in this space that technically belonged to her. She turned on the computer, which took several minutes to start up, and began to familiarize herself with the systems. It wasn't long before the demands began. Executives who barely looked at her handed her stacks of documents to photocopy, dictated emails at breakneck speed, and asked her to schedule impossible meetings. By mid-morning, Emma was already exhausted. It was then that she met Mark Rivers, the marketing director. Tall, handsome, and with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, Mark approached her desk. "So you're the new one," he said, looking her up and down. "I hope you're more competent than the last one. I need these reports sorted and summarized for the 2 o'clock meeting. Oh, and my coffee. Black, no sugar at 65 degrees, Emma completed, remembering Martha's warning. Mark raised an eyebrow. "I see that at least you can follow simple instructions. We'll see how long you last." As Mark walked away, Emma felt a mixture of indignation and surprise. She had always considered Mark a brilliant and charismatic executive. Seeing him behave so arrogantly and dismissively was an unpleasant revelation. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of seemingly endless tasks. Emma, accustomed to leading meetings and making important decisions, found herself struggling with the photocopier, running back and forth with cups of coffee, and trying to decipher the illegible handwriting of impatient executives. Most revealing, however, were the conversations she overheard. Fragments of discussions about budget cuts, rumors of layoffs, and complaints about the incompetence of the new management reached her ears. Each comment was like a stab, making her question everything she thought she knew about the state of her company. At the end of the day, exhausted and with sore feet from the cheap shoes she had bought for her disguise, Emma was preparing to leave when Mark appeared again. "Sarah, right?" he said, not waiting for an answer. "I need you to stay and finish organizing these files. It's crucial for tomorrow's presentation." "But it's quitting time," Emma protested weakly, surprised by her own submissiveness. Mark looked at her with a mixture of amusement and disdain. "Oh dear, if you want to survive here, you'll have to learn that quitting time is flexible, especially for someone in your position. Understood?" Without waiting for an answer, Mark dropped a stack of folders on her desk and left, whistling cheerfully. Emma sat there, looking at the mountain of work in front of her, feeling a mixture of anger and determination. This day had opened her eyes to a reality she never would have imagined from her ivory tower. And although part of her wanted to scream her true identity and put an end to this unfair treatment, she knew this was only the beginning. As she set about working on the files, Emma promised herself that she would get to the bottom of what was happening at Thompson Corp, no matter what the cost. What she didn't know was how high that cost would be and how much it would change her life in the process. As the days passed, Emma, in her role as Sarah, began to adapt to her new routine. The long hours, unreasonable demands, and condescending treatment became her new normal. However, beneath the facade of the inexperienced secretary, her analytical mind worked tirelessly, gathering information and connecting dots. One morning, while preparing the conference room for a directors' meeting, Emma noticed something strange. Mark and Barbara, who normally maintained a strictly professional relationship, were engrossed in a whispered conversation in a corner. Their tense expressions and furtive gestures piqued her curiosity. "We have to be careful," she heard Barbara say. If someone discovers... Mark interrupted her with an abrupt gesture as he noticed Emma's presence. Sarah, what are you doing here? Preparing the room for the meeting, Mr. Rivers, Emma replied, feigning nervousness. Well, hurry up and leave, Mark snapped. And remember, whatever you may have heard, it's none of your business. Emma nodded submissively and left, but the seed of suspicion was already planted. What were Mark and Barbara hiding? As she pondered this, she literally bumped into Anna, another department assistant. The documents Anna was carrying scattered across the floor. Watch where you're going, Anna exclaimed, bending down to pick up the papers. I'm so sorry, Emma apologized, helping her. As they collected the documents, Emma noticed that some were financial reports. Taking advantage of a moment of distraction from Anna, she quickly memorized some of the numbers she saw. Anna looked at her suspiciously. You're new here, aren't you? A piece of advice. Keep your head down and don't meddle in things that don't concern you. There are eyes and ears everywhere. With those cryptic words, Anna walked away, leaving Emma intrigued and a little uneasy. That afternoon, while organizing mail, Emma met Charlie, the janitor. An older man with a kind smile, Charlie seemed to be invisible to most executives. Don't worry, little one, he said, seeing her struggle with a pile of envelopes. Everyone feels overwhelmed at first, but you'll learn to navigate these waters. Emma smiled gratefully at him. Thank you, Charlie. Sometimes I feel a little lost here. Charlie looked around and lowered his voice. Be careful, Sarah. This place has changed a lot in the last year. It's not the company it used to be. What do you mean? Emma asked, intrigued. Well, I've been here for over 30 years. I saw little Emma Thompson grow up, God rest her father's soul. But lately, there are secrets, Sarah. Things that shouldn't happen in a company like this. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of secrets, Charlie? The janitor looked nervously around before answering. Documents that disappear, closed-door conversations, employees who are fired without apparent reason. And the rumors. They say there's money that doesn't appear in the books. Before he could say more, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted them. Charlie quickly grabbed his cleaning cart and walked away, leaving Emma with more questions than answers. In the following days, Emma found herself divided between her tasks as Sarah and her growing undercover investigation. She began to pay more attention to hallway conversations, to documents passing through her hands, and to employees' reactions to certain management decisions. One afternoon, while working late organizing files in Mark's office, Emma found something disturbing. Hidden among seemingly normal invoices and contracts was a document detailing transfers to an offshore account. The amounts were astronomical and didn't match any legitimate company operation she knew of. With her heart racing, Emma discreetly took photos of the document with her phone. Just as she was putting the file away, she heard voices approaching. It was Mark and Barbara. I'm telling you, someone is snooping around, Barbara was saying, her voice tense. The numbers don't add up, and I've noticed some documents are missing. Relax, Mark replied in a tone that was meant to be reassuring, but sounded more irritated. No one can prove anything. Besides, by the time they figure it out, it will be too late. Emma barely had time to return to her desk and pretend to be working when the door opened. Mark seemed surprised to see her. Sarah, what are you doing here so late? I was finishing organizing the files you asked for, Mr. Rivers, Emma replied, trying to control the tremor in her voice. Mark looked at her suspiciously. Well, you can go now. And remember, discretion is part of your job. That night, in the safety of her apartment, Emma examined the photos she had taken. The evidence was clear. Someone was diverting funds from the company. But who was behind it all? And how deep did this conspiracy go? As she pondered her next steps, Emma realized she was in a dangerous position. If Mark and Barbara discovered her true identity, her entire plan would fall apart. On the other hand, if she didn't act soon, the company her father had built with so much effort could collapse. With renewed determination, Emma decided it was time to seek allies. Charlie, with his knowledge of the ins and outs of the company, could be invaluable. And maybe, she thought, even the hostile Anna might have useful information. What Emma didn't know was that her actions had already caught the attention of more people than she imagined. In the shadows, both friends and enemies were beginning to move, and the delicate balance of power at Thompson Corp was about to break. The following days were a whirlwind of activity for Emma. During the day, she continued her role as Sarah, the inexperienced but hard-working secretary. At night, she immersed herself in investigation, analyzing the documents she had photographed and looking for connections. One morning, while preparing coffee in the break room, Emma noticed that Anna was watching her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "You know, Sarah," Anna said, approaching, "for being new, you seem very interested in things that don't concern you." Emma felt her heart race, but kept her cool. "I'm just trying to do my job well, Anna. I want to learn everything I can about the company." Anna let out a dry laugh. "Learn? Believe me, there are things in this company that it's better not to know." Unless what?" Emma asked, intrigued. Anna looked around before speaking in a low voice. "Unless you're looking for something specific. Look, I don't know who you really are or why you're here, but I'll give you some advice. If you're investigating what I think you're investigating, be careful. There's more at stake than you imagine." Before Emma could respond, Anna quickly walked away, leaving her with a mixture of confusion and hope. Could Anna be an unexpected ally? That afternoon, while filing documents in the basement, Emma encountered Charlie again. "Sarah, what a surprise to see you down here," said the janitor with a kind smile. Emma decided it was time to take a risk. "Charlie, I need your help. I think something very bad is happening in the company and you might have crucial information." Charlie's expression turned serious. "I knew you weren't a simple secretary. Who are you really, Sarah? Or should I say, Miss Thompson?" Emma felt the ground open beneath her feet. "How? I've watched Emma Thompson grow up," Charlie said with a sad smile. "You may have changed your appearance, but you can't change who you are at heart. Your eyes, your way of speaking, they're your father's." For a moment, Emma considered denying everything, but something in Charlie's gaze made her change her mind. "You're right, Charlie. I'm Emma Thompson. I'm here because I know something isn't right in my father's company, and I'm determined to find out what it is." Charlie nodded approvingly. "I'm glad to see that Mr. Richard's spirit lives on in you. Listen, I've been collecting information on my own. Suspicious invoices, strange conversations, employees who disappear overnight. I think I can help you." For the next hour, in the farthest corner of the basement, Charlie shared with Emma everything he knew. Names, dates, suspicious transactions. Each piece of information was like a light in the darkness, gradually illuminating the complete picture of corruption that her father had discovered. "But be careful, Emma," Charlie warned at the end. "Mark and Barbara aren't the only ones involved. This goes beyond them, possibly to the highest levels of the board of directors." Emma felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. "Thank you, Charlie. You don't know how much this means to me. I promise I'll do the right thing with this information." That night, back in her apartment, Emma immersed herself in the task of connecting all the dots. With Charlie's information and her own discoveries, she began to see the pattern. It wasn't just a case of embezzlement. It was an elaborate plan to systematically dismantle the company from within. As she worked, a disturbing thought crossed her mind. If the conspiracy reached as high as Charlie suggested, who could she really trust? And how could she, one person, stop something so big? The sound of her phone pulled her from her reflections. It was a message from an unknown number. "I know who you are and what you're doing. Meet me tomorrow at 7 p.m. at the coffee shop on the corner. Come alone." Emma stared at the message, her mind racing. Was it Anna or someone else who had discovered her identity? Whoever it was, she knew this meeting could be crucial for her investigation, or it could be a trap. With determination, Emma decided she would attend the meeting. But she wouldn't go unprepared. It was time to use all the resources at her disposal, even if that meant revealing her identity to more people. As she prepared for another day as Sarah, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to cross a point of no return. The secrets of Thompson Corp were about to come to light, and she would be at the center of the approaching storm. The day passed with palpable tension for Emma. Every look, every whispered conversation seemed to be charged with hidden meaning. As she performed her daily tasks as Sarah, her mind kept racing about the mysterious meeting that would take place that night. At 6:45 p.m., Emma left the Thompson Corp building, her heart pounding in her chest. She walked the few blocks to the designated coffee shop, constantly looking over her shoulder to make sure no one was following her. The coffee shop was almost empty when she entered. She scanned the place, looking for any familiar face, when a voice startled her. "Over here, Emma." At a secluded table, partially hidden by a decorative plant, was Anna. Her expression was a mixture of nervousness and determination. Emma approached cautiously and sat down. "So you knew?" Anna nodded. "I suspected from the beginning. You're good, but there are certain things you can't completely hide. Besides, let's say I have experience in recognizing people who aren't who they claim to be." "What do you mean?" Emma asked, intrigued. Anna sighed deeply before answering. "I'm not who I appear to be either. My real name is Andrea Vega, and I'm a private investigator hired by a group of minority shareholders of Thompson Corp. They've been concerned about some irregularities in the company." Emma felt a mixture of relief and caution. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I believe we're on the same side," Andrea replied. "I've been investigating for months, and I've discovered things that would make your blood run cold. But I need your help to get to the bottom of all this." For the next hour, Andrea shared with Emma everything she had discovered. Her investigation corroborated much of what Emma already knew, but also added new and worrying pieces to the puzzle. "The plan is bigger than you imagine," Andrea explained. "They're not just diverting funds, they're preparing the company for a hostile takeover. Mark, Barbara, and some board members are in collusion with a rival corporation. They plan to devalue Thompson Corp's shares to the point where they can buy it for a fraction of its real value." Emma felt short of breath. "But why? How can they betray my father's trust like this?" Andrea looked at her sympathetically. "Money and power, Emma. It always comes down to that. They've been promised lucrative positions in the new merged company in exchange for their cooperation. We have to stop them," Emma said, her voice full of determination. "But how? We need solid evidence." "That's where you come in," Andrea said. "With your access as Sarah and my investigative experience, we can gather the necessary evidence. But we'll have to move fast and be extremely careful." As they discussed strategies, Emma noticed a movement out of the corner of her eye. A man at the coffee shop bar seemed to be paying too much attention to their conversation. "Andrea," Emma whispered, "I think we're being watched." Andrea looked discreetly in the direction Emma indicated. Her expression tensed. "It's one of Mark's men. We need to leave now." The two women casually stood up and headed for the exit. Just as they were about to reach the door, the man from the bar moved to intercept them. "Ladies," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "Mr. Rivers sends his regards and reminds you that loyalty to the company is paramount." Emma felt a chill run down her spine, but Andrea intervened calmly. "We appreciate the message. Please inform Mr. Rivers that we understand perfectly the importance of loyalty." The man stared at them for a moment before nodding and stepping aside. Emma and Andrea quickly left the coffee shop, blending into the crowd on the street. "That was close," Emma said, her heart still racing. Andrea nodded. "Too close. Emma, from now on, every move we make will be watched. We'll have to be extremely careful." "What do we do now?" Emma asked. "We stick to the plan," Andrea replied with determination. "But we need to speed things up. Tomorrow during the board meeting, we'll make our move. I'll need you to get me access to the server room while everyone is distracted with the meeting." Emma nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. "I'll do it. But Andrea, if things go wrong—" Andrea interrupted her with a reassuring smile. "If things go wrong, I have a backup plan. But I trust we'll succeed. Your father would be proud of you, Emma." Those words resonated in Emma's mind as they separated, each taking a different path to avoid being followed. That night, as she prepared for the crucial day ahead, Emma couldn't help but think of her father. Would he really be proud of her? Or would he be disappointed that the company he had built with so much effort was on the brink of collapse? The morning arrived with a palpable sense of urgency. Emma, in her role as Sarah, arrived early at the office, her mind going over every detail of the plan they had drawn up with Andrea. As she prepared the boardroom for the meeting, Emma noticed the tension in the air. The arriving executives seemed more agitated than usual, exchanging furtive glances and hurried whispers. Mark entered the room, his usual air of arrogance mixed with a touch of nervousness that only Emma, knowing the truth, could detect. "Sarah," Mark barked, "make sure no one disturbs us during this meeting. It's crucial that there are no interruptions." "Yes, Mr. Rivers," Emma replied, lowering her gaze to hide the flash of determination in her eyes. As the board members arrived, Emma carefully observed their interactions. Some seemed complicit, exchanging knowing gestures, while others showed signs of concern or confusion. Just before the meeting began, Barbara approached Mark. Emma made sure she was close enough to hear their whispered conversation. "Are you sure it's time?" Barbara asked, her voice tense. Mark nodded firmly. "We have no choice. The buyer is pressuring. Today we'll present the restructuring proposal and prepare the ground for the sale." Emma felt her heart race. It was worse than they had imagined. They weren't just diverting funds, but planning to sell the company that very day. With the meeting underway, Emma took the opportunity to slip away. She quickly headed towards the server room where Andrea was waiting. "Did you get the access card?" Andrea asked as soon as she saw her. Emma nodded, handing her the card she had borrowed from Mark's desk. "We have to hurry. They plan to present the sale proposal today." Andrea cursed under her breath as she swiped the card. The door opened with a soft click. "Then we have less time than we thought. Let's go." Inside the server room, Andrea worked quickly, connecting a device to one of the terminals. This will download all the financial records and emails from the last 6 months. Hopefully, we'll have all the evidence we need. Emma nervously watched the door. Each second seemed like an eternity. "How much longer?" "Just a few more minutes," Andrea replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Almost done." Just as Andrea disconnected the device, they heard footsteps approaching down the hallway. Emma felt her blood run cold. "Someone's coming!" Andrea quickly tucked the device into her bag, and they both desperately looked for a place to hide. The supply closet at the back of the room seemed to be their only option. They squeezed inside just as the server room door opened. Through the slats of the closet, Emma could see Mark enter, followed closely by a man she didn't recognize. "Are you sure no one suspects?" the stranger asked. Mark let out a confident laugh. "Relax, Victor. Everything's under control. In a few hours the board will approve the restructuring, and by the time anyone realizes what's really happening, it'll be too late." "It better be," Victor growled. "My company isn't investing millions in this plan for you to ruin it at the last minute." Emma had to suppress a gasp. This must be the representative of the rival corporation planning to acquire Thompson Corp. The two men continued discussing details of the plan, oblivious to the two women hidden just feet away. Emma felt her heart beating so loud, she feared they might hear it. After what seemed like an eternity, Mark and Victor finally left the room. Emma and Andrea waited a few more minutes before daring to come out of their hiding place. "That was too close," Andrea whispered, her face pale from the tension. Emma nodded, still trying to process what they had overheard. "We have to act now, Andrea. We can't wait any longer." Andrea looked at the clock, and then at Emma, her expression a mixture of determination and concern. "You're right. It's time to put the final phase of the plan into action. Are you ready?" Emma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Everything her father had worked for, the future of hundreds of employees, all depended on what they did in the next few hours. "I'm ready," she said firmly. "Let's do this." As they cautiously left the server room, Emma couldn't help but think about how her life had changed in such a short time. From carefree heiress to undercover investigator, she was about to confront the people she had once blindly trusted. What she didn't know was that the events that were about to unfold would change not only the fate of Thompson Corp, but also her own life in ways she never could have imagined. The clock struck 2:30 p.m. when Emma and Andrea put the final phase of their plan into motion. The board meeting was at its peak, and it was the perfect moment to act. "Remember," Andrea whispered as they prepared, "whatever happens, stay calm and stick to the plan." Emma nodded, feeling a mixture of adrenaline and fear running through her veins. She removed the wig and contact lenses that had been part of her disguise as Sarah, revealing her true appearance. It was time for Emma Thompson to make her grand entrance. With determined steps, Emma headed towards the boardroom, Andrea following close behind. Without bothering to knock, she flung the doors wide open, interrupting the meeting in full swing. The silence that fell over the room was deafening. Mark, who was in the middle of a presentation, stood slack-jawed, his face changing from surprise to panic in a matter of seconds. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emma said, her voice firm and clear, "I apologize for the interruption, but I believe it's time we had a much-needed conversation about the future of Thompson Corp. Barbara was the first to recover from the shock. Emma, dear, what is the meaning of this? We weren't expecting you today. I'm sure you weren't, Emma replied with a cold smile. In fact, I'm sure you'd prefer I wasn't here at all. Mark tried to regain control of the situation. Emma, I don't know what you think is happening here, but I assure you everything is in order. Perhaps we should discuss this in private. Oh, I don't think so, Mark, Emma interrupted. I believe everyone present deserves to know exactly what you've been planning. With a gesture, Andrea stepped forward and connected her device to the room's projector. Within seconds, documents, emails, and financial records began to appear on the screen. As you can see, Emma continued, addressing the stunned board members, for months certain individuals in this room have been systematically diverting funds, manipulating reports, and preparing the company for a hostile takeover. Murmurs of shock and confusion filled the room. Some board members seemed genuinely surprised, while others, Emma noticed, seemed more concerned about having been caught. Mark, his facade of confidence crumbling, tried one last desperate play. This is ridiculous. You can't barge in here and throw around baseless accusations. Security. But before anyone could move, the door opened again. To everyone's surprise, Charlie entered, accompanied by 2 police officers. I'm afraid that won't be necessary, Mr. Rivers, one of the officers said. We have a warrant to confiscate all financial and electronic records of Thompson Corp., and you'll be coming with us to answer some questions. Chaos erupted in the room. Mark and Barbara were handcuffed and escorted out, while other board members desperately tried to distance themselves from the conspiracy. Amidst the tumult, Emma found herself face-to-face with Victor, the representative of the rival corporation she had overheard in the server room. You're cleverer than we thought, little Thompson, Victor said with a mixture of admiration and frustration. But this isn't over. There are forces at play bigger than you can imagine. Before Emma could respond, Victor was approached by the officers and taken away for questioning. As the police began gathering evidence and interrogating those present, Emma found herself surrounded by those board members who weren't involved in the conspiracy. Their faces showed a mixture of shock, relief, and concern. Emma, said one of them, an older man who had been a close friend of her father, we had no idea of the magnitude of all this. What's going to happen to the company now? Emma looked around at the expectant faces, at the officers working, at Andrea and Charlie who were watching her with pride. She took a deep breath before responding. Now, she said with determination, we're going to rebuild. We're going to make Thompson Corp the company my father always dreamed it would be. Transparent, ethical, and focused on the well-being of its employees and customers. As she spoke these words, Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had unmasked the conspiracy and saved her father's company, but she knew this was only the beginning. The challenges that awaited her would be just as difficult, if not more so. What Emma didn't know was that while she celebrated this victory, other forces were already in motion, forces that would stop at nothing to get what they wanted, and that would see her triumph as a mere complication in their larger plans. The real battle was just beginning. The days following the dramatic revelation in the boardroom were a whirlwind of activity for Emma. The news of the conspiracy at Thompson Corp spread like wildfire, generating headlines in every newspaper and newscast in the country. Emma found herself at the center of a media storm, facing an avalanche of questions from journalists, investors, and employees alike. Each day brought new challenges and revelations. One morning, as she prepared for another long day of meetings and interviews, Emma received an unexpected call. "Miss Thompson?" a grave voice said on the other end of the line. "This is Detective Ramirez. We need you to come to the police station. There are developments in the case that you should know about." With a knot in her stomach, Emma headed to the police station. Detective Ramirez greeted her with a grim expression. "Miss Thompson, first let me congratulate you on your bravery," the detective began. "However, I'm afraid the situation is more complex than we initially thought." Emma felt her heart race. "What do you mean?" The detective pulled out a folder and opened it on his desk. "We've been interrogating Mark, Barbara, and the others implicated. What we've discovered is concerning. It seems the conspiracy goes beyond Thompson Corp. There are indications of a corruption network involving several major companies and high-ranking government officials." Emma felt short of breath. But how is that possible? What does this have to do with our company? Apparently Thompson Corp was just one piece of a much larger puzzle, Ramirez explained. The hostile takeover they were planning was part of a scheme to monopolize several key sectors of the economy. And there's evidence that some of these plans were set in motion during your father's management. Those last words hit Emma like a punch to the stomach. No, she said, shaking her head in disbelief. That's not possible. My father would never have been part of something like this. Detective Ramirez looked at her sympathetically. I understand this is difficult to process, Miss Thompson. But the facts are the facts. We found documents signed by your father that suggest that at the very least, he was aware of some of these activities. Emma stood up abruptly, unable to keep sitting. There has to be an explanation. My father dedicated his life to building an ethical company. He couldn't have been part of this. I suggest you prepare yourself, Ramirez said gently. This investigation is just beginning, and I'm afraid more things will come to light that could be unpleasant, Ramirez continued. Stunned, Emma left the police station. Her mind was a whirlwind of contradictory thoughts and emotions. How could she reconcile the image of the loving father and ethical businessman she knew with these new and disturbing revelations? That night, unable to sleep, Emma found herself reviewing old photos and documents in her father's study. Every image, every memory now seemed tainted with doubt. A knock on the door startled her. It was Andrea. I thought I'd find you here, the investigator said, entering the room. I heard about what happened at the police station. How are you holding up? Emma let out a bitter laugh. How do you think? I just discovered that my entire life might have been a lie, that the man I admired, who I believed was incorruptible, might have been one of them. Andrea sat down next to her, observing the photos scattered across the desk. Emma, I know this is hard, but don't jump to conclusions. Your father might have had his reasons. Reasons for being corrupt, Emma snapped. Reasons for doing what he did, Andrea corrected gently. The business world at that level, it's complicated. Sometimes the lines between what's right and what's necessary become blurred. Emma ran a hand over her face, exhausted. What am I supposed to do now, Andrea? How can I run this company, face the media, the employees, knowing what I know? Andrea looked at her with determination. You'll do it because you're stronger than you think. Because regardless of what your father may or may not have done, you are your own person. And because Thompson Corp needs a strong leader now more than ever. At that moment, Emma's phone rang. It was an unknown number. With some apprehension, she answered. Miss Thompson, said a deep, unfamiliar voice. I don't have much time. There are things about your father and about Thompson Corp that you need to know. Things that could change everything. Meet me in an hour at the abandoned dock in the industrial sector. Come alone. Before Emma could respond, the call cut off. Who was that? Andrea asked, noticing the paleness on Emma's face. Emma hesitated for a moment before answering. I don't know. But I think I'm about to discover the truth about my father, for better or worse. The night was cold and damp when Emma arrived at the abandoned dock. The place was deserted, illuminated only by the dim light of some rusty street lamps. Despite Andrea's warnings, Emma had decided to attend the mysterious meeting alone. As she waited, she mentally reviewed the events of the past few weeks. Her life had taken a 180-degree turn, and now she was about to face a truth that could change everything again. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps on rusted metal alerted her. A figure emerged from the shadows, an older man, looking tired but with shrewd, penetrating eyes. Miss Thompson, the man said, approaching. Thank you for coming. My name is Ernest Vidal. I was an old friend of your father. Emma looked at him cautiously. I've never heard of you. Ernest smiled sadly. I'm not surprised. Richard was very careful about separating his personal life from certain aspects of his business. What do you mean? Emma asked, feeling her heart race. Ernest looked around before continuing. Emma, what I'm about to tell you will change the way you see your father, Thompson Corp, and perhaps the entire world. Are you prepared for that? Emma nodded, though she wasn't sure she really was. Your father, Ernest began, wasn't the man you thought you knew. Yes, he was a brilliant businessman and in many ways a good man, but he was also involved in something much bigger and more dangerous. The corruption network, Emma murmured. Ernest shook his head. No, Emma. Your father was fighting against that network. You see, years ago, Richard discovered the existence of a secret organization, a group of powerful businessmen and politicians who were manipulating the country's economy for their own benefit. Your father infiltrated that group with one goal, to dismantle it from within. Emma felt short of breath. But the documents the police found, part of his cover, Ernest explained. Your father had to do questionable things to maintain his facade, but it was all part of a larger plan. He was gathering evidence, preparing to expose the entire organization. Then why didn't he do it? Emma asked, her mind struggling to process this new information. Ernest's face darkened. Because they found out. The night before he could put his plan into action, Richard Thompson died in a car accident that was no accident at all. Emma felt the world stop around her. Her father was not only not corrupt, but he had been a secret hero, and had paid the ultimate price for it. Why are you telling me this now? She managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. Because you're in danger, Emma, Ernest responded urgently. By exposing the conspiracy at Thompson Corp, you've alerted the organization. They believe you might have access to the information your father gathered, and they'll do whatever it takes to silence you. At that moment, the sound of screeching tires filled the air. Several black cars appeared, surrounding the dock. Run! Ernest shouted, pushing Emma towards a hidden exit between the containers. As she ran, Emma heard gunshots and shouts behind her. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Shock at the revelations about her father, fear for her life, and a growing determination. Now she understood that her fight to save Thompson Corp was just the beginning. She had a bigger mission, to complete the work her father had started, to expose the truth and dismantle the organization that had cost Richard Thompson his life. As she slipped away into the night, Emma knew nothing would ever be the same. The path ahead was fraught with dangers, but she was determined to follow it, no matter the cost. What she didn't know was that this decision would lead her to face enemies more powerful than she had ever imagined, and to uncover secrets that would shake the very foundations of society. The following days were a blur of frantic activity. Emma and her team worked tirelessly to organize and analyze the mountain of information they had recovered. Every document, every recording, every financial record was another piece of the intricate puzzle of corruption that her father had uncovered. This goes beyond simple bribes or embezzlement, Andrea explained, pointing to a complex network of transactions on her laptop. We're talking about decades of systematic manipulation of the country's economy. Politicians, judges, businessmen, they're all involved. Emma nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. And now it's up to us to expose it all. Ernest, who had been making discreet calls to his contacts, joined the conversation. I've managed to arrange a meeting with the Attorney General. It's risky, but it's our best chance to bring this to justice. Can we trust him? Charlie asked, always cautious. We'll have to, Emma replied with determination. It's our only option. The meeting was scheduled for the following night at a safe house on the outskirts of the city. As they prepared, Emma couldn't help but think of Barbara and her sacrifice at the warehouse. Had she managed to escape, or had she paid the ultimate price for her final act of redemption? When the time for the meeting came, the tension was palpable. The Attorney General, a middle-aged man with astute eyes and a grave expression, listened in silence as Emma and her team presented the evidence. This is extraordinary, the Attorney General finally said, leafing through the documents. If this is true, we're looking at the biggest corruption scandal in the country's history. It is, Emma affirmed. My father gave his life for this information. Now we're asking you to do the right thing and act on it. The Attorney General looked at them for a long time before nodding. I will. But you must understand that this won't be easy. The people implicated are powerful and won't go down without a fight. Just at that moment, the sound of sirens filled the air. Police car lights illuminated the windows of the house. It's a trap! Andrea shouted, running towards the back door. But it was too late. The house was surrounded. Victor entered, flanked by police officers and men in suits. Sorry to interrupt this little meeting, he said with a cold smile. Emma Thompson, you're under arrest for theft, corporate espionage, and conspiracy against the state. Emma looked at the Attorney General, who avoided her gaze. You "You're part of this." The Attorney General at least had the decency to look ashamed. "I'm sorry, Miss Thompson, but real power isn't in exposing the truth, it's in controlling it." As they were handcuffed and led out of the house, Emma felt her world crumbling. Everything they had fought for, all of her father's sacrifice, seemed to have been in vain. But then, just as they were putting her in the police car, she saw something that gave her a spark of hope. In the crowd of journalists and onlookers that had gathered outside the house, she recognized a familiar face. It was Anna, the assistant who was actually an undercover investigator, and in her hands she held a USB drive identical to the one they had just confiscated from Emma. With an almost imperceptible movement, Anna nodded in her direction before disappearing into the crowd. Emma understood the message. The fight wasn't over. As the police car drove away, Emma looked out the back window, watching the safe house shrink in the distance. But instead of despair, she felt renewed determination. Yes, they had captured her. Yes, it seemed the conspiracy had won. But Emma knew that as long as the truth existed, as long as there were people willing to fight for it, there would always be hope. The road ahead would be difficult. She would face trials, both in the courts and in the court of public opinion. The conspiracy would use all its power to discredit and silence her. But Emma Thompson, the heiress who had become a crusader for justice, was ready for the battle, because now she understood the true price of power. It wasn't money, or influence, or even control. Real power was in the truth, and in the courage to defend it against all odds. As the car disappeared into the night, Emma made a silent promise. To her father, to herself, and to all those who had been victims of this vast conspiracy. The truth would come to light, no matter the cost. And so, with Emma in custody but hope still alive, the stage was set for the next battle in the war for truth and justice. A battle that would determine not only the fate of Thompson Corp, but the future of an entire nation. Because as Emma had learned, true power doesn't reside in those who hold high positions or control vast fortunes, but in those who have the courage to stand up to injustice and fight for what is right, regardless of the consequences. The story of Emma Thompson, the heiress turned heroine, was far from over. In fact, in many ways, it was just beginning.